My name is Breno, Brenno, and I'm a student here at Launch School, just like you are, except that I've been here perhaps a little longer. I am currently at the very end of the core curriculum. I have just started TypeScript course, and I can tell you that you're in for an exciting, challenging, rewarding journey. If just before we start, I were to tell you one thing for you to remember, is that the hardest thing, in my experience, is to build momentum. But once you've got momentum, it is much, much easier to ride that momentum until you lose it. Then you've got to build it again, and that's hard again. Keep that in mind as we go about our conversation today. And before I forget, let me paste here a link to the feedback form for this presentation. Make a copy of that so that after the presentation, take 20 seconds to give us some feedback and tell us how this benefited you, what you thought. That will help us improve for the next round of presentation. It will be much appreciated. All right, so with that said, let us get right into it. We today are going to be talking about overcoming study blocks, overcoming setbacks on this path that we are entering, the path to programming success. We will focus on 3 specific kinds of blocks. And as we do so, we're going to identify not only the setbacks, but also we're going to devise and suggest strategies on how to deal with them. But I have to tell you, from the get-go, that this is based on my personal experiences, on strategies that have helped me, and even though I've done my research to put together this presentation, it ultimately comes down to how well you know yourself. How well do you know how you learn? How well do you know how you avoid learning? How well do you know what helps you keep going? Learning is, in a sense, a self-learning journey, right? We got to learn what kind of learners we are, right? So that we can help us learn better and keep that momentum going. I will share with you, again, my experiences, but you want to make them your own, right? As we start, if you want, feel free to type on the chat some common blocks, some common difficulties that you faced when undertaking to learn something new in general, or learn programming specifically. Maybe this is your very first time and you're coming from a different field. Maybe now this is your 10th attempt to get going, and this time, hopefully, you will succeed. Screen time, overwhelm, for sure. Those are, those are great challenges, great temptations, right? No deadlines. So how can we arrive at our goals when there is no deadline for that? Not when we want to move to the next. Very good. These are great points. Too much information, not retaining things well enough. Can't you learn until you sit down and then you look at your computer and there are so many temptations around us, right? How do we focus? Excellent. So it seems that we are in the right place, because now we're going to talk about precisely those things in here. Illusion of competence. Yes. How well can you know if you learned, or if you just feel that you're learning, again, because you're being spoon-fed. Very good. Great points. All right. So we're going to life. Life is our third block that we're talking about. And so thank you for mentioning that, right? And of course, we cannot escape life, but we can improve our odds and try to make it work for us and with us. Okay, so too much information, so much to learn is going to be our first focus in here. How do we deal with information overload? How can we manage overwhelming complexity? The key here is that to deal with information overload, the first and most important strategy to adopt is to break it down. I cannot overemphasize the importance of breaking down a complex, larger problem into simpler, smaller parts. Breaking down complexity is helpful not only dealing with blocks and setbacks, but also with problem solving in general. Maybe you've heard this before, maybe you've experienced this right now, but this is a very common strategy in programming related problem solving, right? Breaking things down, modularizing, separating concern, dividing and conquering, right? Those are going to be very familiar strategies when we are solving coding problems, but they are also very helpful strategies when we are solving life problems, learning problems, right? How do we keep on task? How, again, do we avoid being overwhelmed and process information and learn better? The breakdown strategy is basically an analytical strategy. That means we break down a large whole into its component elements. Ideally, we want each component to become its own small problem that we can solve independently from the others. This allows us to separate our concerns in a modular manner. And again, I'm using those words very, very intentionally because those words are words you are going to hear as you move through this journey that is learning how to program. Separation of concerns, modularity, right? And these are things we are talking about, again, from the get-go, but they will be with you as far as you go in this. Now, here's the question, though. Breaking down, great, we got that. Making things simple, simpler and simpler. But how do we know how far to break things down? When do we stop? Should we reduce everything to zeros and ones, to subatomic particles? No, right? At some point, this breaking down becomes counterproductive, right? There must be a stopping point. And the stopping point is this. We should break things down into chunks. What are chunks? Chunks, the word in English gives you an idea, right? You bite a chunk of your sandwich. But in the context I'm using the word has a more specific technical meaning. Chunks are not just any parts, not just any small pieces. Chunks are meaningful parts. They are smaller groups rather than atomically scattered units. Chunks are simpler, but they are still a chunk of something that is bound together by meaning. In other words, chunks will be the baseline. And when we arrive at a chunk that is meaningful to us, that is more familiar than the larger problem, that we can approach a little more confidently, that might be a good stopping point. So we solve that little bit, that little chunk, a little more confidently than the larger problem, right? Chunking becomes then the baseline for our decomposing strategy. Now that we've broken down complexity into manageable chunks, what next? Well, we have a bunch of chunks now, so we need to put them back together. We need now to move from breaking things down to big picture thinking. In other words, we move from analysis to synthesis. How do we put things back together? Well, we tie those chunks back together again through meaning. Again, chunking comes to our rescue. Chunking is both our decomposing strategy and our composing, connecting strategy. Chunks are both the units we strive to decompose large problems to. They are smaller, self-contained problems, and they are the modular units of which the larger chunk, the larger problem, should consist of. But I realize that this is a little too abstract, right? A little too theoretical. How can we grab onto this idea? How can we understand it in a more hands-on manner? Let us try an experiment. We're going to, apologies again, we're going to try a little hands-on experiment. This is an interactive experiment to illustrate the power of chunks and chunking. How do we identify the simple components that make up a complex whole? I am going to give you 5 seconds on the next slide for you to remember, for you to memorize what you will see. 5 seconds only. Are you ready? Are you ready? Let me know in the chat. All right. Great. You have 5 seconds to memorize what you're going to see. 1, 2, 3, 5. All right. So, do you remember what you saw? Absolutely not. How disappointing. We prepared ourselves our entire lives for this, and perhaps an Arabic letter, Hindi or Arabic symbols, maybe one okay, Tim Jones maybe remembers one character. How is that so, Tim? What makes you think that you remember one character? So does Mustafa. He remembers at least one character, some language letter. Okay, there is hope in there. So for those characters, you're calling them characters, so I'll use the word for now, that you think you remember, how is it that you were able to remember it if you remember that? What allowed you to grasp it? Thank you, team. That is exactly what I wanted to hear. And Mustafa, thank you again. In your answer, there is a keyword that I want us. Thank you, Tonya. You are amazing. You are all amazing. That's exactly it. When confronted with these strange, very good, with these strange sequence of symbols, when confronted with something that is baffling, strange to us, we try to make sense of it. And one of the most common strategies to make sense of the unfamiliar is to link or to associate or to tie it together with something that is a little or a lot more familiar. A character looks like a spider. Well, we know spiders. That helps you glue that strange symbol into something familiar, and by association you can retrieve it a little better. You are a little closer to it, right? Very good. You happen to know Arabic letters, right? So you recognize some of those letters. You are creating little clusters that are glued together by a meaningful relationship. In other words, you are chunking things together to help you tackle this difficult, complex, strange, unknown, situation, right? Excellent. Because you've done so well, I'm going to give you a second chance. I'm going to give you now a chance to look at another sequence of symbols and see if you can do better this time. I have faith in you. But this time, I'm only give you 1 second. Are you ready? Very good. Not 5 seconds, 1 second. So good luck. 1, 2, 3, go. There, less than a second. How is that? Do you remember the sequence of 5 symbols that I just showed you? Oh, okay. So you were tricking me, right? You were just holding back before. What was it? Those were 5 fairly complex symbols. Amazing. You see what a little bit of practice does? You tried it one time, it didn't work so well. Then you tried again a second time with some practice, one time before, and you did amazingly well. I guess we could wrap up this seminar right here. I think I've proven my point. All right. Now, seriously, how were you able to do so much better this time? Does anyone have any hypotheses in here? What was different this time? Yes, we were very familiar with the characters. Excellent team. We were ready, Eric. That's totally true. And here's the thing. In team, I think you've hit this on the nail. You did not very good. We did not have to process 5 different symbols, five different bits of information. You were able, because of your familiarity with the word, with the characters, with the system within which those characters have meaning, let's call it the alphabet, you were able to chunk those 5 bits of information up into one larger group, one larger chunk, right? So it's much easier to try to remember and recognize 1 than 5. 1 word rather than 5 characters, right? So you see what we're doing in there, right? This is how we learn things. We chunk things up, and to give you an even more hands-on example, right? Maybe some of you here, maybe all of you know how to drive. But can you remember the first time you had to back away from your driveway, the very first time you were touching your car and you have to put the gear on rear mode and back away? How hard that was? How you had to juggle all kinds of actions, looking in the mirror how many times per second, looking all directions, and then clutch the clutch. Overwhelming. But now, I bet you don't even think about it, because all those myriad of micro actions that required almost your full attention, each one of them, they are now chunked up through practice and experience and familiarity into one compound action that is meaningful to you. This is chunking. This is chunking in learning. This is chunking in life. All right, let me give you one more example. I'm going to go fairly quickly through this, again, because I think the point is very clear. And you may have come across this infamous meme, how to draw an owl, right? You start like this, and then you draw the owl. Well, this is meant to be a joke. But I want you to notice that this joke has a very, very important core of truth to it. This starting point is very close to what we actually should do when trying to accomplish something difficult. The funny part of this joke, though, of course, is that the missing steps between A and Z are missing. So if we were to reconstruct those missing steps, then we would see how that core of truth is there. The problem, again, is that there is a leap from A to Z rather than smaller steps that would take us confidently, gradually, in a manageable way. The key is to see the simple in the complex. You may not know how to draw now, but you might know how to draw simple shapes, circles, triangles, squares. Now, if you can, when you look at the complex problem, breaking it down into simpler, more familiar, more manageable components, then you are well on track to solving it little by little, taking steps as long as your legs can manage. From each step, only take the next step that you're able to take. Make it manageable, from simple to complex, from big to small. Some steps will be simpler than others. Some will require a little more effort, but this is focused effort. The original larger problem now becomes a series of smaller, more attainable problems that can each be solved in isolation. We call this modularity. What follows? So here is the core, working solution. This already looks like an owl on the left side. What follows, the fancy work, is surface effect. It may require more experience, it may have the air of facility or virtuosity, but it depends on the solid steps that precede it. Until you're comfortable taking larger leaps, approach it one small step at a time. If the problem is too steep, make use of a ladder. We'll go back to the ladder in a second. But before we do that, let me show you an example that is a little closer to programming, right? And I know that there are people here on all different tracks that we offer at Launch School. I don't have a Python example in here, but the examples I think will be understandable even if you are in the Python track. So let us take a look here at, say, data types in Ruby and JavaScript. There are many data types in these two languages. You can see, again, them listed there. Memorizing each of them completely independently of each other is a daunting task, just like memorizing each symbol, each character in a sequence of 5 or more unknown symbols, like the first exercise we did a moment ago, right? That makes things much harder. We can begin to simplify this task by realizing, for instance, that despite their specific differences, all these different data types fall under the category data type. So they have something in common, right? That's already a chunk. They are all data types. No matter how different they are, they have something about them, or a set of things about them, that justifies them being in this one category. They have something in common. And we can use this to make things more manageable. For example, we can group or chunk data types according to, say, their truthiness. For those of you who have come across this concept in the prep work, maybe in the beginning of the Launch School core, chunking helps us identify connecting patterns among disparate elements, grouping them as meaningful units. For instance, note how the simpler chunking in Ruby, owing to the smaller number of exceptions, makes it easier to remember or to connect the many data types according to their truthiness than is the case in JavaScript. So again, the specificity in the example is not as important, but in Ruby, if a data type is not false or new, it is truthy. If we get that, I know, right? But if we get that, if we remember the two exceptions, everything else chunks on under the other, the flip side of the category, right? If it is not false or new, it is truthy in Ruby. Now, in JavaScript, we have a few more exceptions, right? We have a larger number of falsy data types, falsy values. So you have to remember, okay, if it is not false, not null, not an empty string, not zero, not undefined, not a number, whatever. If you're learning JavaScript, you know how funny that is. Then it is truthy. You see, we have to juggle way more mental apples, right? Still, there's chunking going on, but it's a more complex, more crunchy, chunk that you have to deal with in here. Now, because I don't want to say bad things about JavaScript, let's explore a different scenario in which JavaScript is now simpler than Ruby. For instance, what if we look at data types from the point of view of mutability? We can group data types according to whether they are mutable or immutable. As before, chunking helps us identify connecting patterns among the disparate elements to group them as meaningful units. This time, JavaScript provides us a simpler chunking, so to speak, because we are able to categorize data types as primitives or objects. If a data type is an object, it's not a primitive. If it's a primitive, it's not an object, right? And primitives are immutable, and all objects are mutable. Again, of course, I'm not going to go over these concepts, right? This is not meant to teach you these concepts, but if you know these concepts, you can see there are just a few things you have to be familiar with so that you can make sense of this vast number of data types. In Ruby, we have a few more exceptions. So we have, again, to juggle a few more apples. We need to remember, we cannot really separate those data types, chunk them into two clear groups, primitives versus objects. That doesn't quite make sense in Ruby. So we have to remember, we have to work our way through juggling a few more specific exceptions so then we can organize that information. But regardless, chunking helps us with that organization. We want to make things manageable. Instead of leaping, we want to use a ladder and take small, controllable steps. The ladder is helpful both ways, when breaking down a problem from complex whole to simpler parts, and when putting it back together from simpler parts to complex compound whole. A key takeaway, if you were to synthesize all these in one sentence, choose the ladder instead of the leap until you're confident enough to take some leaps. The time will come. If not, make sure you can resort to that ladder. This is the key strategy to dealing with overwhelming complexity, allowing you to break down the problem as well as to put it back together step by step. Now, we are ready to take a look at our next study block, our next setback. Oh, sorry, not that kind of setback. Procrastination. How do we start and how we keep the momentum going? Some of you mentioned the temptation when we sit down on the computer, when you look at this screen, right? All the distractions around us, all those, again, tempting, things that will move us away from our task. It's important to realize that procrastination is a habit or a set of habits that we fall back onto in order to avoid starting what we feel are potentially unpleasant tasks. Habits are powerfully ingrained behaviors that we fall back onto unthinkingly. If you've read Barbara Oakley's book that Launch School's prep courses recommends, and if you haven't, I highly recommend them. Barbara Oakley calls habits our inner zombies, and that's why, again, they were here. Barbara Oakley calls habits our inner zombies. Again, they move us in a way that we do not have to think as the habits take over, like zombies. And the best way to fight zombies is, nope, The Walking Dead got it wrong. It's not to fight them. It is rather to outsmart them and make them work for us. I want to explore a couple of strategies, 2 strategies to help us outsmart those inner zombies of procrastination. The first one is to set achievable goals, and it bears a strong resemblance to how we've learned to simplify complexity a moment ago. And this is no accident. Yet again, the ladder as a tool can come handy when dealing with procrastination. We want to make our victories not necessarily epic, history-changing victories. Those are great, but they require a lot of effort. We can arrive at the same effect through very, very small wins, one win at a time. Like the small steps from before, we want small wins. How do we do that? I would like to take a moment for us to understand the habits that drive us a little better. These habits, they push us out of the driver's seat. They take over. Oh, careful again. There they are. And if we understand them a little better, maybe we will know how to make them work for us. Yes, Mustafa. Barbara Oakley. She has a number of books. I've read a couple of them myself. The most famous one is called A Mind for Numbers. I don't quite remember right now if that's the one Launch School recommends, but this one covers our key ideas regardless, and I personally recommend that. But if you look her up and you see some of the books, some of them are more explicitly about learning in general. A Mind for Number, again, is a little more tailored towards mathematical learning how to learn. Thank you, Tim Jones. She has a course on Coursera that is companion to the book. All those are great reads, okay? You can read a few of them, or you can pick one, and again, she will cover the key points no matter what the book is. All right, so let us take a look at the anatomy of a habit, and I hope you bear with my silly puns in here, zombies and anatomy and so on. So a habit in general consists of 3 key components. There is a cue, so what triggers a particular habit. So let us say that you leave a box of chocolates on your kitchen counter, all right, and you walk by it every morning. When you see the chocolate, that triggers a particular behavior. That is the second component, the routine. How do you respond to that cue? Oh, you grab a little chocolate, doesn't hurt, right? But then that behavior, the routine, leads to a reward. Oh, those chocolates are so good. The reward gives you and your brain the incentives to reshape your responses to those cues. And you link them, your body links them, your brain links them. And before you know it, you're doing it without thinking, right? And you see a diagram there, right? The mouse hears a click. The click leads to a behavior walking towards the place where you get your reward, the piece of chocolate. So next time you hear the click, you expect the reward. The third time, you won't have to link them. It will already be linked. And again, it will happen before you know it, right? Those temptations That's how powerful they can be. So how do we deal with that? I want to say that in itself, what we just described is just how habits work. But there can be bad habits, the ones that take us away from our goals, and good habits. Could we trick our circumstances, ourselves into ingraining productive habits? Let us call it, say, study habits. The answer, of course, is yes. And one of the best ways, in my experience, for this is to focus on the process rather than the product. Again, take the ladder over the leap. We want to inhabit the process. We want to make the process a habit so that we resort to the process by default with minimal efforts. Now, process versus product. What do I mean by that? Let us say, so what is an example of a product? An end result, an end goal. Oh, I want to finish core. I want to get a job. I want to be there at the end, but I'm just at the beginning. That goal is likely to overwhelm you because every single day you will realize you are not there yet. Exactly, team. Every single day you realize, oh, no matter how hard I work today, I'm not there at the end yet. That is not motivating, all right? If you can focus on the process, not the product, if you can focus on the present step, not the end goal, you can shift things around. How do we do that? Well, here's a very simple way, one that most likely you already do with or without thinking. Let me share my screen briefly here. Let me share to a different screen. Let's see, how do I do that? Let me show you a tried and true checklist. So you should be seeing here a checklist from one of the courses in the curriculum, right? It's just something I put together, that checklist. Now, what is the idea here in the checklist? So you are confronted with one of the lessons in law school's core curriculum. The lessons are dense, they're complex, right? They have many topics. If you keep your eye on the end goal every single day, remind yourself, I'm not there yet, it's going to be much harder. But if you can break down that larger problem, finishing the course, into smaller, more manageable problems, like we do with a checklist, right? So I broke down one course into dozens of smaller problems. Every day, you will have, if you put in the time, you have the satisfaction of saying, oh, today I accomplished this and that and that. By the end of the day, your huge checklist will be 3 items, 4 items, 1 item shorter. That is a small victory. You can savor that because you know that by the end of today, you are a little closer than you were the day before to where you want to be. And you can savor those small wins. They motivate you and you keep going. You ride the momentum, right? Checklists are great because they transform a small epic victory that is always in the future into small wins that you can collect every day as you go, right? So let me reshare my other screen. Let's see, share. All right, you should be seeing now, again, my presentation, my slide. So checklists are a very simple and helpful way, right? Now, in my experience, part of the fun and also part of the learning is creating your own checklist, right? If you have a checklist, don't just copy and paste it. Try to break down yourself that bigger topic into meaningful chunks that are meaningful to you. Because what is meaningful to me may not be meaningful to you or as meaningful to you. So coming up with your own little chunks will be very helpful, right? And if you need, break down a chunk into smaller chunks, right? And so on and so forth. That's how you solve problems, and that's how you can, again, build a checklist that will already do quite a bit of the learning, just by engaging in making one of them. Now, another strategy, in addition to checklist, is to create chunks of focused time throughout your day. So instead of saying, oh, I have 10 hours, 5 hours to study today, I'm going to spend those 10 hours, those 12 hours, who cares, who needs to sleep? I'm going to spend 22 hours studying today because I don't have to pick up my kid at school today, and I'm going to make so much progress. Well, that might be a little too ambitious, right? Because again, remember those temptations, remember the burnout, you get distracted, right? Instead of doing that, small steps. One way, in addition to the checklist, one other way to create chunks out of these huge, shapeless, a blob of hours that you may have, is to give yourself bursts of intense effort, broken apart, spaced out by moments of reward. Remember the anatomy of the habit. You want a cue that's followed by a behavior that then receives a reward that fuels the next cue, behavior, and reward. And before you know it, your day ends in a productive manner. One of the common techniques for that is what we call the Pomodoro technique. Now, there is another webinar taught by one of Logical's TAs where his name is Trevor, where he goes much in depth on Pomodoro technique. So I'm not going to spend too much time explaining this. He will do that much more in depth. But the Pomodoro technique is just a way to help you find those chunks of more intense effort in a manageable way. The idea is that, again, there will be a cue. Pomodoro, the name Pomodoro, that's Italian for tomato, is, it comes from the fact that the creator of this technique was using a tomato-shaped alarm clock, right? So you set a timer for a chunk of time, say 25 minutes. You set alarm, that's your cue. And you tell yourself, for these next 25 minutes, I'm going to focus. I'm going to turn off my phone. I'm not going to, to go distract myself. I'm going to focus. 12 hours of intense study is daunting, but 25 minutes, we can gather the courage for that, right? So the alarm starts. That's your cue. The behavior follows. 25 minutes of focused effort, no distraction, just for 25. It's not that much. Then, once the alarm rings, 25 minutes later, you've spent time, productive time studying. Now you can give yourself a reward. I don't know, 5 minutes of browsing the internet. Go grab that chocolate. Now go do something. Recharge your energies. Then you set another block of 25 minutes. Before you know it, 3, 4, 5 25-minute blocks later, you've studied quite a bit in a focused, concentrated manner. Each of these blocks, 25 minutes each, is one small win, one small victory. 25 minutes at a time, a day passes by, right? You don't burn out. You adjust it to your level of stamina and concentration, and you make it work. You may realize that 25 minutes is not enough for you, that you need longer time spent. That happens to be my case. That's great. You may realize that, no, 25 minutes is too much. Make it a little smaller. Adapt it to you, right? Think of chapters in a book, sections in a chapter, paragraphs in a section. Those are clusters of meaning. Those 25 minutes are chunks, meaningful chunks of applied effort, right? Whatever, again, those 25 actually might be for your particular case. Now, let me try to summarize the idea, the spirit of what we've been trying to talk about in here. And I'm going to quote a passage from another book that I don't think Logical explicitly recommends, but it is in line with Barbara Oakley's readings, and I recommend it too. You may have heard of it yourself. This is from Cole Newport's Deep Work. And he says, the easiest way to consistently start deep work sessions is to transform them into a simple, regular habit. The goal is to generate a rhythm for this work that removes the need for you to invest energy in deciding if and when you're going to go deep. It becomes a process, right? In short, you create a process, a set of structured routines that you can follow without having to spend much effort having to reinvent from scratch every single time. If you can inhabit the process, you won't have to get out of your way to force yourself to start. The process will become a habit. Just like brushing your teeth every day, you have your breakfast and you sit down for 25 minutes or however long, you study a little bit, take your break, and then again, and the day is a day where you have checked a bunch of small wins in your checklist. And every day you're a little closer to your end goal. Before you know it, the goal is here. But things do not always go as planned. Sometimes life gets in the way. Habits are by their very nature circumstance-resisting, small, self-propelled capsules. They are what you tend to default to without an effort. If you've transformed some of the strategies we've covered into habits, again, like brushing your teeth or going to the gym, they will more likely be able to withstand rough weather and the changing seasons. Most of the time, life gets in the way through small, everyday obstacles, for which the strategies we touched on are a possible solution. Sometimes, however, life can get in the way in a big way, rocking our boat in a way we are not prepared for. It is then that the creation of a network of productive habits that we outline above, it is then that these habits can come to our rescue. Habits, they die hard, for better or for worse. If we surround ourselves by healthy, productive habits, odds are that some of them, by the sheer inertia that makes them habits, will hold us together when everything else falls apart. And this is how we wrap up. So let me just quickly sum up some of the key takeaways, right? In one sentence, what we really want to do is to simplify the complex into simpler chunks. We want to focus on the process rather than the product. We want to turn our processes into habits so we don't have to spend too much effort reinventing the process every single time, but rather inhabiting it. Go from simple to complex. If the leap seems daunting, you choose the ladder, the small step, one small win at a time. Now, where do we go from here? I hope you've enjoyed this workshop. I hope you feel encouraged to use the strategies we covered here in your learning journey through the prep courses and beyond. Great segue to this workshop, I mentioned it in passing, is Trevor's, again, Electrical CA Study Tips Workshop. I believe it's happening in October, right? So keep an eye out for it. I strongly recommend it. I've taken it twice myself. If you haven't yet signed for Launch School, consider giving it a try. The prep courses are free, as you know, and they give you a good idea of what the journey through Launch School curriculum is like. I know some of you are in the Smooth Start program. I think it's a periodical program, so it helps you, as the name says, get started. Let me just paste a link in here in case you want to look into that. And we have some minutes for questions. Let me open the floor for questions. Great, Angel. After 3 months pause from law school, where in the curriculum should we think about restarting again? So that depends on you. Um, I can share my experience. When I started, several a long time ago, I had to make a 5 months, maybe 6 month pause. What I did after 5, 6 months was I said that no, I want to build a momentum I can rely on. So I went back to the beginning and I refreshed, my memory, going over it slightly faster than the first time, but I went from the beginning and I started again. It also depends on where you pause. If that 3 month break happens, say, at the end of the back end portion of the course, right, just before the front end, maybe you don't need to start all over because it's a nice chapter break in the curriculum. So it depends on your particular situation. The bottom line is you want to make sure that you're riding a momentum you can trust and stand on, right? Again, I'm happy to answer more questions. As I receive the questions, yes. During study, there is a concept that I feel I understand, but I don't know how to communicate that understand. Yes. How important is it to learn how to communicate? Eric, that's a fundamental question. And I don't know where you are in the curriculum right now, but you will learn very soon, if you haven't already, that the first 2 courses of the curriculum are also the hardest ones for most of us because it's all so new. They are all about gaining that clarity in communication, learning to be precise with our language, learning how to make ourselves understood, and learning how to show ourselves that we understand what we're reading, right? So um, I would say the best place to practice that are those first 2 courses. There used to be 1 course in my time, but they broke it down again, chunks, right, into 2 smaller courses. Use as you go through them, use a community, use the Slack channel, partner up with fellow students in the same place in the curriculum as you. That's what I did, and that's what I recommend. You will learn a lot from your peers, right? And by the end of the course, you'll see how much you will have grown. But the fact that you're asking that question means that you are on the right track. If you are not aware of the importance of what you're asking, things will be a little harder, right? Because you would have to become aware first. But this is great. How do you break bad habits? Team, I think my best answer is replace them with a better one, right? Breaking habits, like actively breaking a habit, requires a lot of effort. The easiest way is to make that habit less relevant because there is a better one that takes place, one that rewards you just as uh, enjoyably, but one that also, at the end of the day, makes you a little better, a little further along the road you want to be on, right? So replace it with a better one, as opposed to grabbing the hammer to break things up, right? Actively. That again requires a lot of hard work. And habits are great when they are great because they are a way to bypass hard work, right? You default to them. So default to the good ones. Um, Checklists, Pomodoro technique, or if you know yourself as a learner, ask yourself, how do you learn best? How do you enjoy learning best? Because enjoying is important. Yeah. Now, there is so quick reminder, and again, feel free to ask more questions. Quick reminder again, here's the feedback link. On this slide, you see a much shorter link that, even though it's not very easy to remember, it's much easier to remember than the longer one. There we have chunking at work again. Okay, we can make sense of this more easily. Chunking is our friend. Chunking is our friend. In law school, we come from all places in life, from all fields, from all careers, and we come to this knowing a lot of other stuff, right? And we may think that maybe we have, depending on who you are, that maybe we have to restart again from scratch. That's not true. Most of the time, what we already know from other fields can apply with some adaptation, right? So find those associations, those meaningful connections. those analogies that will allow you to use your background as an asset, not just as an obstacle to be overcome, right? I think that also makes things helpful. Now, part of what's great about this is that you meet so many different people in here that are so awesome and smart in different unexpected ways. And if you allow yourself, right, to interact with them, right, you will learn a lot in the process. Okay. Well, I hope this was helpful. I will stay around for a couple more minutes answering more questions if you have them. Uh, if not, you can always find me on Slack. There are not many Brenos out there. I'm happy to talk, to answer questions. Just hit me up. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you have a great day and best of luck.